Today we have Ben Peterson from King County, who's going to talk to us about keeping our lake healthy and noxious weeds and things like that. So, then I'll turn it over to you.
All right. And since it's a small group, feel free to ask questions as we go. That's probably good. Yeah, so I'm Ben Peterson with the King County Noxious Weed Program. So I'm with the King County Noxious Weed Program. You all, when you renew your property tax, there's like a $6.50 fee that everybody pays into our program every year. So you're paying for this slideshow right now. We also have a really extensive website. There's some handouts on the table in the back, and I have more copies up here. Details about our website. So our website really has a lot more info than just a slideshow, especially about specific plants. But right now at the Noxious Weed Program, I'm transitioning between two jobs. I was the aquatic weed person for about 12 years, and I'm transitioning to a different job at the weed program. But I still know a lot about aquatic weeds. We haven't hired anybody new yet, so feel free to ask me whatever questions you want about aquatic weeds. So first I'm going to talk about aquatic systems and what plants grow there generally. Talk about the aquatic weeds that are at Holler Lake here. A little bit about toxic algae, because you probably have questions about that. Terrestrial weeds, upland weeds that are growing potentially all the sort of forest pockets around here, and how to control weeds. And then if there's time at the end, or if there's specific questions, I have a whole bunch of slides after this presentation at the very end, all specifically about water lily. So if you have questions about that. I'm not sure how many people actually live on the lake, and then how many people maybe live near the lake. Okay, so you can answer questions about both. I'm sure if you live near the lake, you go in the lake. So in general, native plants benefit lakes. Native plants, aquatic plants, they stabilize shorelines, provide structure and habitat, take up nutrients, produce oxygen. They resist establishment of native species. So I'm sort of talking about this because sometimes lake fronts will have super manicured, they'll have a bulkhead. So it's good to have some vegetation there. It's good to have some plants as a buffer between the landscaped area and the lake itself. Where aquatic plants grow in general, they grow where the light can reach the bottom of the lake. So depending on how dark the water is in the lake, so Holler Lake has fairly dark water, just due to the natural tannins, the decomposing wood, the water runs through the decomposing wood in the surrounding area, and it turns the water sort of tea color. So there's nothing wrong with like dark water in general. But the darker water means the light can't get as deep. And so the littoral zone, the place where the light can reach, is sort of compressed in some cases. It also depends on how shallow the lake is. So, for instance, water lilies, they can grow in water that's 6 to 8 feet deep or so. And if the light can reach that deep in the lake, the area that they can grow in can reach out pretty far. So Holler Lake, I think it's about 35 feet deep in the middle. But the edges, they slope in gradually. So ideally, you'd have a mix of native plants in a lake, not just a solid chunk of one species. So that's one reason. Luckily, you don't have a milfoil in the lake. That's a really bad weed that grows down in the water in Lake Washington and most other lakes around here. A whole bunch of Green Lake as well. But the ideal situation for an upland forest as well as in a lake is you have a mix of plant sizes, structure, so it provides a lot of habitat spaces. Listen to the plant list. I can share this a PDF of this slideshow with you all, so you can have it for later if you want. This is a list of plants that are aquatic plants that are at the lake or in the lake. And there's only 3 species that are noxious weeds. All the rest are native. So that's good news. The bad news is the species that are not native are very prolific. But that's sort of their job, I guess.
Ben,
Yes.
can you discuss a little bit about class B and C?
Oh, very good. Very good.
Presumably class A as well.
Yeah. So for noxious weeds, I should start over. Noxious weeds are always non-native plants, so they're not indigenous to this area. Most of them aren't even indigenous to North America. And they're particularly invasive. You know, there's a lot of plants that are here that are not indigenous. You know, that's all the ornamental plants in your yard are not indigenous, but they're not also not invasive. They don't move out into open space areas on their own. So these plants are particularly invasive and also impactful, usually ecologically. The classes indicate how widespread it is, not how bad it is ecologically. So class C weeds are the most common one. Iris, yellow plague iris, water lily, Himalayan blackberry, the non-native blackberry, that's a class C weed. They're not required to be controlled by landowners because they're so widespread. However, they at the same time, they're also the most impactful. But if we were tasked with trying to get landowners to control them proactively, then landowners would go bankrupt because there's so much of it. But we do provide a lot of advice on how to control those. And then class B is locally abundant, but it's very impactful. The goal is to keep it from propagating and spreading more. And then class A are brand new weeds that we know that are very impactful in other ecosystems that have a similar climate. And we want to try to totally eradicate those before they become widespread. So luckily there's no class A weeds in the lake. There's one that grows around the lake called giant hogweed that grows in some of the properties nearby. And I'll talk about that. But that's sort of how they go. They're sort of like class A, super high priority, not widespread yet. Class C is super widespread, very impactful, but not required to be controlled. All right, so on to the first plant. This is fragrant water lily. There's a lot of it at Holler Lake. It's the only floating leaf plant that grows at the lake. And it grows probably out maybe 100 feet sometimes. You probably have a better idea than I do. I don't remember how far it grows out. A good ways. The way you can tell it's fragrant water lily, it has these really flexible stems. So when the water level drops a little bit in the summer, water lily pads still stay right on the surface. The flowers are usually white, sometimes pink, but they're all the same kind of flower. The roots are these sort of like muddy corn cobs you can see up there. And they're pretty big and robust, and they hold a lot of energy. And because all the energy, all the carbohydrates they store in them, if you just go out and pluck the leaves, it'll grow back pretty readily. You'll have to pluck them, for several years in a row to really get rid of it, to deplete the energy. You can see on the map there, it's fairly common. There's a lot of it in Western Washington and lakes. I'm not sure, I think that's probably Panther Lake in Kent, that picture down there. That's a very shallow, very big lake. It's almost all water. Somebody was talking, maybe a little bit of the history about.
Yeah, that was me. The guy planted them in the booties to sell at the market.
Oh, wow.
And tied the lily in bulbs to rocks and rode around in his boat. Oh.
Like Johnny Appleseed, huh?
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
So that's fragrant water lily. I can talk, I'll have a slide a little ways later that talks a little bit about how to control it. And then if you're interested later, I can go into a lot more detail. So another one that grows on the lake is the class B weed, purple loosestrife. I go out to the lake every year and we pluck the purple loosestrife flower heads and bag them to keep it from spreading. And from the picture, it looks like a whole bunch of other plants and it really disappears in the other vegetation that's along the shore. The key characteristic of the plant, it has a square stem. You can see in that picture on the left, you can see the square stem. It's really distinctive. You can feel it if you roll it in your fingers. It has really showy magenta flowers you'll see in mid July into August. Hopefully not August, because hopefully we'll have come by and cut the flower pins. But if not, please do it yourself.
That's the one that you can't even put in your yard waste.
Yeah, and I think I can talk about that in a minute. Yeah, you're not meant to put it in your yard waste because they don't want it to survive the composting process at Cedar Grove and spread further. So this one goes in the trash.
And you could chop off the head instead of pulling it out the root.
That's the minimum. Yeah.
Okay.
If you pull it up from the root, that's even better. If it's growing in sand, you can get it up from the root. We try to pull them up from the roots when we were out there, but we sort of have a limited amount of time. I'm not sure what time of year we're going to be out the lake. It might be later in July. So if you do see it out in your waterfront, go for it. All the better. You'll save us time. This shows what purple loosestrife is on the left, and then some other plants that are similar. There's a plant called Douglas Fryeria or hardhack. There's a common wetland shrub. Fireweed, which is a native plant, that usually grows in seepy areas, usually in the forest.
ICP, you mean?
Seepy, like a sort of a wet hillside that it's not like a flat area. It has like a wetland necessarily. Sort of like there's like a little bit of a spring or like a road cut. Usually fireweed grows in burned areas. It's good. It responds well to disturbance in that way. And then there's a plant called Watson's willow, or this is the one that's you're most likely to confuse with purple loosestrife. But it has Watson's willow herb, has a round stem. The leaves are a little bit different. They're sort of finely serrate, finely sawtoothed. But the main difference is Watson's willow herb, you can pull it up with 2 fingers, no problem. It has really shallow roots. Whereas purple loosestrife, usually you need a shovel. If you're really lucky and it's growing in loose gravel, you can pull it up with 2 hands. But for the most part, you need a shovel of some sort. All right, so this is where we found it last year. And every time we find a plant, I take a point with this one here, map it, and then we rip the flower heads off. So, yeah, long term, we're trying to keep it at bay. It used to be that we would totally fill up the canoe and have 4 trash bags full. Nowadays, usually it's two trash bags, 1.5 trash bags. So it's not getting worse. But anyway, that's my main focus generally with Hollow Lake is the purple loosestrife. And then I live like 1.5 miles that way, so I just come here for fun too. This is 2022. This is the north end, the street entrance on the north end, which most people don't go to because it's hard to get through.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's probably 2 trash bags worth. So the other plant that's impactful that grows around the lake that you may not even notice is yellow flag iris. It's the only iris that really grows wild around here, so that you don't have to worry about confusing it with a native iris. The way you can tell, I have a picture in the next slide. It has like a midrib on the center of each leaf. You can sort of feel it. It's sort of like a bridge you can feel. Yellow flowers, obviously pretty showy in June, and then by the end of June, there'll be like these little seed pods. They're about 3 inches long, these corn kernel type seeds, and you can see in that bottom center picture, the seeds float. So if you do have iris in your waterfront, the best use of time is to go out there and at least pluck the seed pods and the flowers and bag those and just put them in the trash. It won't spread too much laterally, although it does have a big root system. But if you want to keep it from spreading around the lake, those floating seeds, pluck the seed pods.
My kids call those pickles.
Yeah.
Kind of look like pickles.
Yeah, they're like a pickle. They're monocots, just like bananas. So they're related to bananas in that regard.
And
Yep.
what is a monocot?
A monocot that's a good question. It's a plant. So broadly speaking, there's two categories of plants, monocots and dicots. Monocots all have parallel veins. So think of like grasses, iris, bamboo, and things like this iris, even bananas, they're monocots. The veins are all very parallel in the leaves. And then dicots are most other plants. Most trees are dicots. And it has to do, there's certain herbicides that only act on one type of species. And it makes it easier, like if you're working in natural areas and you want to kill like certain plants that are growing amongst the grass without killing the grass, there's certain herbicides that are selective. But monocots, they'll have parallel veins. This is iris on the left, a little piece of iris and a little piece of cattail. You can sort of see the midrib in the iris. There's a wetland, I think that's out near Black Diamond. I think that's near Lake 12, huge patch of iris. The thing to know if you're going to go pluck the flower heads and the seed pods is to wear gloves because the sap in the iris can sort of give you an allergic reaction. Nothing really bad. You have a question?
Ben,
Yes.
can you go back a slide? You had a map of Washington, and there's a key that's impossible to read.
Oh,
It-
okay, close.
I'm just curious about it.
The darkest green is more than 1,000 separate locations of the plant.
Of
Of
the iris?
iris in this case. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, and then I think it's less than 10 locations, which I don't believe. I think there's much more than 10 locations in Clallam County and Jefferson County. I think this is the way it was reported to the State Department of Agriculture. Yeah, it's sort of a general representation of how common it is.
got it.
So, yeah, you can see the two side by side. The main thing is to wear gloves if you're plucking the seed pods. It's not toxic really, but it might give you an allergic reaction. So one other thing to check out at the lake is cattails. Most of them are native. Most common cattails are native. But there are some non-native cattails. I don't know if they occur here at Holler Lake or not.
I've never seen one.
Cattails at all? Okay.
No.
They were on the plant list, but yeah, I'm not sure where they would be. If there's a gap between the male and female flower part, as you can see on the right here, then it potentially is the non-native cattail. If there's no gap, then it's the native one. The main issue with the non-native cattail is that they grow in much deeper water. They can sort of grow in water that's up to potentially 2 meters deep compared to the native cattail that just grows in water that's a meter deep, 3 feet deep. So. Okay. And I can talk a lot more about aquatic plants. We got the aquatic plant book. You can send me pictures of anything you pull out of the lake. But this is, you probably wonder about the algae in the lake. So I'm definitely not an expert on the algae. There are other people that work at King County that are experts, and I have one of their contact info at the end. But the short answer is there's two types of algae. There's actual filamentous green algae, and that's what this stuff is. If you can pick it up with a stick, if you can throw it at your little brother, and it's filamentous green algae. It's not toxic. It's native, and it grows on nutrients that are in the lake, and it also grows really well when the water's warmer. It's impactful in that when it decomposes, it uses up oxygen, so there's less oxygen for the fish, but it's not toxic. So if you can pick it up with a stick or your finger, then it's filamentous green algae. It sort of turns sort of brownish in the.
Does Green Lake have it?
Yeah, almost all the lakes do. The big lakes like Lake Washington, it probably has it like on the edge, but it's so big. Lake Washington is pretty oligotrophic, meaning lower nutrients overall. Some lakes are very eutrophic, meaning lots of nutrients, and that's just sort of naturally how they are. I think Holler Lake is in between, mesotrophic. But yeah, I'm not a limnologist. And then there is cyanobacteria, which is the actual name for blue-green algae, which isn't really an algae, but it's a type of bacteria. It's potentially toxic. Definitely not always, and only very sometimes does it produce enough does it produce toxins that it's harmful to humans or animals. But this stuff, it's free floating. You can't pick it up with a stick. It'll just flow right through. It's just like little tiny, tiny specks of paint floating on the surface. Sometimes it's green, sometimes it's brown. It looks similar to pollen, but a little different. And it only sometimes produces toxins. I was looking at, I think the next slide talks about where you can find out info about this. There's a state website and it has a record of water quality tests here at the lake. Unfortunately, most recently, I think the most recent one was like 2019. It was done there, but it was the most recent time it was tested for being toxic was 2013. But that's not to say it can change pretty quickly. That you'll see lakes where they go from being totally non-toxic to being toxic in a week, and toxic for like 3 weeks, and then non-toxic.
I vaguely remember picking up some samples. I think it was that stuff.
Okay.
And somebody gave me some bottles to put it in.
Yeah.
I believe I dropped it off along the ship canal someplace.
Yeah.
Is that right, Phil?
Yeah. So by chance, the King County Environmental Lab on the Ship Canal right near Seattle Pacific University.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they do all the cyanobacteria testing for the state, or at least for Western Washington. So they don't do just samples testing just for King County, but that's where they end up going. And there's
That time it looked scary and they said it was okay, so.
Yeah. Just by looking at it, as far as I know, you can't tell if it's producing toxin or not, which is a little weird. Yes.
So, I'm unfortunately a physicist and not a biologist. So cyan is a color, it's a bluish green.
Yeah.
But there's also a chemical called cyanide, which is a deadly toxin that's got carbon and nitrogen. Are those related, or do they just happen to be homophones?
I think they're homophones. Yeah, they're, if you can, when you go to the next slide, I think, yep. So you should check out this website. NW toxic, or you can just do a Google search for Washington State toxic algae. I'm pretty sure they have some details in here about the different specific toxins that are produced by these. And I don't remember cyanide or being one of the toxins.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's people that are really into this. I've reached my limit of my knowledge. At least know there's more knowledge, more info out there. Oh yeah, so there's that yellow box that I put on there, some details about that. But you can find the lake, and I did that earlier today and found out that it's not normally tested. But I have a contact info at the end of this for someone at King County that might be able to help you if you have questions about testing or if you're concerned about something. Okay, land weeds. Oh, there's Sky again. She was in the canoe earlier. So that's poison hemlock next to her. Really tall one. So we'll start out with poison hemlock. So poison hemlock is the one truly poisonous plant that's out here that grows wild. It's not native. It's one of the weeds. It is acutely toxic. And the reason it's a problem is because the vegetative part looks like a carrot. So very, very occasionally, maybe 15 years ago, last happened in Olympia, somebody thought it was a wild carrot and they ate it and they died pretty quickly. I think like within an hour. So it's acutely toxic. People can also have issues if you brush cut a whole bunch of it. Like let's say that area there next to the stop sign. If it was like a day where there's like an inversion layer with no wind and you went there and you mowed it all and you might get the fumes and start to get a headache just by doing that. You hear about kids like making a whistle and, they get really, really sick.
Does it look like Queen Anne's lace?
It looks similar to Queen Anne's lace, yeah. Yeah, our website has a lot more details about this, how you can tell them apart. But the main thing is that it has these purplish spots. And I forget if it has smooth skin or not, but yeah, hairless stems, yeah. No hairs on the stem and the purplish splotch. The purplish splotches are pretty distinctive. It can grow fairly tall, it'll flower later in the year, but the purplish splotches are pretty distinctive. If you are going to dig it up, we have another slide about it. Okay, I'll talk about digging it up right now. If you do see it, you can totally dig it up. Just wear gloves. If you brush against it, it's not a big deal. You're not going to get sick just by walking up and brushing against it. But if you do dig it up, put it in the trash bag and leave it outside. Don't leave it in your car and drive around, which is like somebody did, I know, and they go, I'm getting woozy. So yeah, you can dig it up. It's not an issue. Wear long sleeves, wear gloves. But if it brushes against your skin, it's not going to really hurt you. But just don't like roll around in it and smash it up. But
How common is it?
it's pretty common. Yeah, you'll probably spot it along the roadsides, maybe in a park, in people's yards. Our goal is to get all the public agencies to control it. So we try to work with parks departments and roadside crews to control it proactively. So we're trying to require them to control it, but we don't require individual homeowners to control it. Our focus is to get public agencies to control it first, and then in a few years, once we get a really handle on that, then we'll work with landowners.
Would the rabbits eat it?
I
Yes, they would.
don't know. I would think they got it figured out by now or not. maybe the rabbit population would be much worse if it wasn't here. So that's the plan. Our website has a lot more details about identifying it.
Ben?
Yeah.
How much of a problem is hemlock here?
In terms of human health,
Oh, just like how invasive is it?
it's pretty common.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty common. I'm sure there's some within pretty close to here, a block from here. Yeah, if you see something that looks like a wild carrot, this time of year will probably be this tall if it hasn't been controlled. In February, it's just like a few inches tall, and then June it'll be this tall, starting to flower. So it's pretty common. It's pretty common. Himalayan blackberry is the super common blackberry that you see everywhere. It's delicious. It's totally fine to eat. It was actually brought and cultivated 100 years ago by, I think, Luther Burbank, the horticulturalist, but he made a bad choice. It's distinctive because of like 5 petals, 5 leaflets per leaf. You can see in the lower left corner. Sort of like this boxy stem, pretty sharp thorns. You can see the lower right corner. Yeah, pretty big root. You can see sort of that almost potato-sized root. Delicious berries. Berries are totally fine to eat, although I wouldn't eat them like, right next to the freeway on ramp or this way you somebody sprayed it. It'd probably be fairly obvious if they sprayed it. But yeah, it's very impactful. Not because in open space forests, it'll grow in clearings and it'll prevent the native plants, the native trees from growing there. So the forests won't regenerate on their own, and it'll sort of really change the trajectory of the forest. In terms of control, the easiest thing to do is cut it back and then dig up the roots. So whack it down with a stick or cut it back with clippers, rake that out of the way, and then dig up the roots.
Okay.
Yep.
About a year ago, the street end at where Meridian fronts on the north end of Howard Lake was impenetrable with Himalayan blackberry. And someone came in, and I don't know how they did it, dynamite, Agent Orange,
I know
whatever.
what you're talking about.
Beg your pardon?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know that area.
Okay, do you know who did the work?
I don't know if it's Seattle Parks or Maybe SDOT, because it's like an SDOT right away. I don't know.
Be down at the lake or right at the stop sign.
Both,
Is that where all the natives are now?
yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that,
that's definitely a project.
Yeah,
Is
like
that-
wood chips and everything.
definitely a
Yeah.
project. Somebody did a really good job of it. Unfortunately, I don't know who it was. I would really like to give them a commendation.
Carolyn and Bob
I beg
headed
pardon?
that. Carolyn and Bob. Carolyn,
Bob Brooks and Carolyn Crockett.
yep, they headed that. At least the replant. I don't know about the removing of the blackberry.
Yeah.
What's Carolyn's last name?
Crockett.
The replanting's the fun part, so hopefully they did the hard work too.
Well, it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
They really, it's just fabulous.
Yeah.
They really deserve a commendation. Nice.
So this next one is common holly or English holly, it's the old common name. This is super common. It moves into forests all over the place. I'm sure everybody has one or two in their yard. Very impactful. It changes the ecological trajectory of forests. Birds move it around really easily. And it's actually officially a noxious weed as of 2 months ago. The holly lobby in Washington State was very powerful. It's true. But after about 15 years of working on it, it's been officially designated noxious weed. The holly growers can still grow it legally, but you can also, it has the designation that it's a noxious weed. Has these really waxy leaves. I don't know if you know, I don't have a picture of Oregon grape, but does anybody know what Oregon grape is?
Oh,
Yeah, the shorter stuff.
Yeah, Oregon grape's a native plant, has yellow berries, yellow flowers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yellow flowers. The leaves don't hurt nearly as much. They don't curl back like this and wave around. They're less leathery. Doesn't grow like a tree. Grows like a shrub, either a tall shrub or a low shrub. But common holly, yeah, has these red berries. Pretty bad. So if you have a plant, dig it out, and you probably have to dig out the root. You can just cut it; it'll root sprout. That's strategy. Common holly is not. I mean, common ivy is same thing as English ivy. It grows. You know, it's been around a long time. Super common in people's yards.
So they're all ivy or just?
It's most ivy. I mean, there are different cultivars that are less invasive. But this is the one that's super common in people's yards. The biggest issue is it climbs up trees. And it'll, even really big trees, it'll climb all the way up, make them really heavy, cause them to blow over a lot more easily. So if you have it growing on your tree, you want to make a ring around the tree. Sever the ivy a few feet up and make a ring around it. And the ivy in the tree will die. It'll still stay there, but it'll die and make it a lot less likely to fall over. And then you can focus on the ground ivy.
It's good at climbing up wood fences too.
Yeah, it climbs up fences. I think it keeps some really big fences upright. And then this one here, this is the only really class A weed. Relatively rare, high priority weed that grows around here, called giant hogweed. It grows really tall, 10 to 12 feet tall, but it takes 3 years to get that big. The first year, it will just be a little tiny plant, big. The second year, it'll grow about 3 feet tall, and then the fourth year, it'll grow really tall. It's big, sunflower-like seeds, but I know conveniently, like poison hemlock, it has these purple splotches on its stem. They're pretty indicative of the plant. The biggest issue with this plant, other than sort of taking over some open space areas, is that if you get the sap on your skin, even if you wash your skin off, it'll still be in your skin. And if you get sun on your skin, you'll get like a chemical burn. And that'll happen, that'll occur for like a few years.
Weird. Wow.
From what it's what?
No.
Yeah, so it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So Yeah, if you have a plant, they pretty much only occur in the very northwest corner of the lake. There's two properties where a bunch of them are, and we know about them, and we help them dig them up every year. But if you do spot a plant that looks like this, let us know. We can come and help you dig it out. It's pretty reasonable to do. Like if there's a big one, I'll slice it with a shovel and then chop that up and put it in the bag and dig up the root. But he's got to wear gloves and long sleeves. He's really get that chemical burn.
Dang. So you not recommend people doing it themselves or?
You can do it yourself, but just make sure you know what you're doing. The next slide I have cow parsnip.
Oh.
So there's a plant called cow parsnip, which is a native plant. Cow parsnip really only grows about 6 feet tall. Giant hogweed 10 to 15 feet tall, but they are related. I think the same genus actually. Cow parsnip will give you a similar kind of chemical burn apparently, but it's less severe. I don't know how less severe. But they do look similar. Cow parsnip is a native plant, but if you are concerned about it, you can dig it up in your yard. You can always send me pictures if you're not sure. You can sort of see them side by side. I mean, giant hogweed is beautiful. It's a big, showy, sort of Victorian era plant. Not as big as Gunnera, but pretty cool. So be on the lookout for that. I think that's it. Oh, animation in here. Oh gosh. Oh, my big sky did this. Okay. So I have one slide about aquatic weed control methods here. I have a whole bunch at the very end. We can talk about those individually, or I don't know how much time we have. In terms of aquatic weed control, I'm mostly talking about at this lake the water lilies. So if you have water lilies on your waterfront, the most straightforward thing to do is go out and just pull a few, just enough so you have a swimming beach. You can use a weed rake or a weed razor, which is like a V-shaped razor blade thing, like on the end of a long broomstick kind of thing. You chuck it out on a rope, you pull it back, as you drag it back, it severs the water lily stems of the water up the ground of the lake. There's another machine that Grant has been using the past few years. We'll talk about that, but it's basically a kind of underwater edge clipper.
Yeah, it's like it attaches the end of the boat. It's got an electric motor that's powered by the 12-volt battery. You just row it around and chop all the lilies. And then they float up to the surface, and it takes 3 times as long to get them all out of the water. That's the kind of.
Yeah, but they're like 4 feet wide, maybe.
Yeah, about 4 feet
And then you
wide.
have like this 6 or 5 foot wide rake that you can put on a boat also.
I also like had to make several laps over the same area so it wouldn't like miss. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was also rowing. It's a good workout.
Yeah. So if you're gonna target water lily in that manner, you can go for the short win of just getting them out of there for the short term. They will grow back within like a week or two. The long term, if you're trying to really keep them from growing back, you need to starve the roots. And that involves cutting them repeatedly before the leaves get to the water surface. And so I don't know how often you do it, Grant, maybe every
Once a week.
once a week all summer.
Awesome.
And he's getting really close to having them not come back. So it's not.
3 years.
So that's one way that you can do as a private man.
So before the pads get to the surface, if we can get them
Yeah.
out.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's because when they get to the surface, then they really start photosynthesizing. Yeah.
So the first year that I was doing that, something happened and the whole mud mat or whatever you call it floated up, and it was massive.
Yeah.
But the last 2 years that hasn't happened. And I hope it's because the roots are depleted and they don't have as much
Yeah,
lift, whatever that was.
yeah. The roots can float up to the surface when they start dying. There's other things.
If they sink back down, do they just replant themselves?
I don't think, I don't know. I mean, I think,
Because we've had quite a few.
Do they
of those
sink back
giant-
down?
I don't think they sink back down.
Well, it's like somebody said it flips, but it definitely went back down and then came back in another area the next year.
How big?
Huge.
Like 10 by 10?
Like brought up a piece of lumber,
Oh
a
my.
tree that had sunk at some point. Like big enough to lift up a tree.
Another option is weed mats. You can see in the lower right corner. Basically, you go out and cut the water lilies, and then you can put down a weed mat and then a small area in front of your waterfront, I think up to 10 feet wide or something like that. And that'll keep any plants from growing there.
Does that not risk the rhizome pads coming up though? Or not?
I don't know. Maybe, but probably not immediately.
I mean, some of that stuff that floated up, we hauled it out, and you can see a layer of lily pad root, and then a layer of fabric, and then a layer of lily pad root, and then a layer of fabric. So, the mud, so that it maybe is temporarily affected, but unless you keep it cleared off, it'll just.
Yeah, I know. People put a lot of weird stuff in their lakes and carpets. So, yes,
What is an HPA permit or a pocket HPA permit?
I'll talk about that in a minute. That's a very good question. Think of the next slide talks about that. But the other option is essentially hiring an aquatic weed control contractor, and I can go into a whole lot of details about that. But I don't think that's happened at Hollow Lake before, at least not in the past 15 or so years. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. That's me getting sunburned. So the Department of Fish and Wildlife, they regulate any manipulation of plants that are in the water because it affects wildlife habitat. So generally, if you're going to mess with anything in the water, like the sediment, driving machinery in the water, anything like that, you have to get a hydraulic project approval permit, which is a big permit. It's what they use, what's needed if you're going to drain a wetland to build a shopping center or, build a freeway across Portage Bay or anything like that. Put in a new dock somewhere, you need a HPA permit. However, I don't know, 10 or 15, 20 years ago, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, they realized that a lot of people were bugging them. I really just want to remove my weeds. Can't I just do that? Why do I have to get a big HPA permit? And they made this pocket HPA permit, which is lit. You look it up, you just do a Google search for aquatic plants and fish, booklet permit, WDFW. And it's a free permit. Basically, it's this booklet that you can print up at home. And it tells you when you can cut weeds legally, how big of an area in your waterfront you can cut weeds, how big of an area in your waterfront you can cut native plants. It gives you permission to put down weed mats in certain manners. It gives divers permission to do suction dredging for weeds. So it's free. You just gotta look it up and follow the rules in the booklet. So it covers you when Grant does stuff like using the weed cutting machine. He's covered when he does the work, the regulations in this permit.
Honestly, I've never heard of anybody doing that in the lake. Getting a permit to do their lake.
Yeah, I mean, this, you just need to print it and basically have it. You don't need to apply for it, you just need to print it and have it and follow the rules.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's luckily pretty straightforward. There's an exemption for purple loosestrife. So if you have purple loosestrife, you don't even need this permit. It says it right in there. It's cool. But if you're going to dig iris out of standing water, if you're going to cut water lilies, you need this booklet. So I told you, but I don't have anything to do with it. Weed disposal, we talked about this. For purple loosestrife, put in the garbage. For vegetative plant parts like seed pods from iris, things like that, anything that can propagate, it's best to put it in the trash. Plant material that once it's dry, it won't propagate on its own, like dead ivy, Dead holly, it's not like the holly berries, things like that. You can let them die and you can put them in the compost. You can also pile it up like on a corner of your property. If you have a corner where it won't reach, where you have it off the ground. You sort of make a raft out of like sticks. So like the ivy or the holly won't touch the ground. Really good. So yeah, the main thing is if it could propagate on its own, put it in garbage. Also the poison hemlock, put that in the garbage because you don't want that in the compost and all that stuff.
So ivy should go in the trash.
If you have a corner of your yard you can pile it up in,
Yeah.
and like keep it from rooting on the ground or just keep an eye on it, then I think you're good to have it composting. Ivy does produce seeds, like these little purple seeds.
But like, if I don't want to do that, can I put it in my green waste bin?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's
Okay.
okay. This will be on the slideshow that I give you guys later. But if you wonder about plant ID, you can always send me pictures or send our program pictures. We have a website with our email address. You can also use Seek by iNaturalist, which is this really great app. Yeah, it's called Seek by iNaturalist, and it helps you identify plants with a picture app on your phone. It doesn't always work, but it'll also at least take the guesswork out of stuff. It helps you get down to at least what genus it is. So that's sort of fun to use. And then if you really want to geek out on plants, you can get the real iNaturalist app. And this is what botanists use to report rare plants and unusual plant sightings. And there's a whole documentation process where people verify if the sighting is real or not. People that are experts, like we verify if noxious weed sightings are real, and there's a vetting process. But they're both fun to use. So look up Seek by iNaturalist and just plain old iNaturalist if you want to do that. Seek by iNaturalist is a great one for just sort of casually trying to look up what a plant is. Okay, you don't have to copy this stuff down. It'll be in the slideshow I give away. But there's different links to aquatic plant ID stuff. Department of Fish and Wildlife Permit, the toxic algae website. A woman named Rachel Gravon who works at King County that can help with potentially toxic algae questions. There's a person named Amy who works at the city of Seattle that is, from what I heard, that your best bet to find all of something in the city of Seattle in terms of air quality issues. And my contact info as well. Yeah, that's what I have. If you have more questions about water lilies, I have a bunch more slides after that. But
That's about time, but I'm gonna turn the lights on and people can ask you.
So I have a question, not about Powder Lake, but there is a overflow. There is a depression in the land about 50 yards south of this building. It's just east of Ashland Avenue, north of 125th. It's not, almost but not quite on that map. If you see the pale blue line,
yeah,
it's just to the left of that, where that pale blue line
that's
goes.
the outlet.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
And so when it rains, that area fills up with water. And when it doesn't rain, it fills up with homeless people. And so I know you're snickering, but they're there.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know what to do about the homeless people. And I'm also kind of curious that looks like it's an overflow for Howler Lake.
It is.
And it's got a big conical grate at the south end that I would think would be a drain if the water got really, really deep there,
Right.
which I've never seen.
No, I haven't seen it in years, but it has.
Okay. And then if you go look at the Seattle Public Utility map, there is a huge sewer pipe that runs from there up to the south.
Okay.
And I've never wander down deep inside because there's signs all over the place that say no trespassing, and I see those signs are there for a reason.
Tempted.
Beg your pardon?
Are you tempted?
Of course we're tempted. I have to balance my natural curiosity with my natural sense of
You ever built
self-preservation.
a robot?
Beg your pardon?
A robot?
I've got a 4-year-old grandson.
Yeah.
I wrote to him and, go out there and.
In theory, it goes from the lake into the pond, and it gets so high, it ends up in the Green Lake. Those long cuts,
Yeah. I
and it
know.
ends up Wicked Springs and then Green Lake.
Yeah. I know this neighborhood eventually flows into Green Lake during big storm events.
Right.
But yeah, it seems like, well, Green Lake was lowered by like 10 feet 100 years ago, 120 years ago.
Something like that. He used to train out, what's now Ravenna Boulevard.
Yeah. So I guess the Olmsted thought, well, we could lower it and then have more parkland around the lake.
Mhm.
So I wonder if that's what they did here. I don't know. I mean, obviously they put in a pipe because obviously the lake used to be bigger.
It's well, we used to flood so that those two houses on Ensmore would have water in their yard. I've seen both yards way back. But it was ever since they put in the pipe out the lake right here and put that retention pond in Tassie Park.
I don't know about the hydro.
Yeah, it doesn't get real high. They want it to go south.
There are two things, actually. One is just an announcement that, for voting, you don't actually have to vote here in person. You can also vote online. You'll get, if you're a member, you will get, to vote. So you can do it either way. And please just do one or the other. And the question for you, Ben, is, so on the board, we've talked, here and there about, lake water quality, and that in the past, there used to be someone that came out and checked that regularly.
Good question.
And that it seemed kind of like it got lost and like
Yeah.
that wasn't happening. So any information for us on that?
So up until I think 2019, City of Seattle paid into King County's lake stewardship program. I don't know how much they paid a year, but they paid enough that it allowed the lake stewardship program to sponsor or support a volunteer at the lake to take water quality samples.
Yeah.
And about that time, the city decided they weren't going to fund that anymore. So I don't know how much it costs per year. But the woman, I asked somebody about this earlier today. Slide. Repeat. I was going to delete slide anyway. So you suggested checking with Amy
Okay.
Michelino, anyway, at the City of Seattle, asking her if they could support that program again.
Yep.
And then also check with Rachel Gravant at King County.
Okay.
She's more of a scientist that knows exactly all about the toxicology, but she knows about that program as well, the lake stewardship program.
Do you know if other lakes are getting regularly tested that people are swimming in? Just
Yeah.
keep like public health information and community aware?
Well, Green Lake is,
Sure.
but that I think is through Seattle Parks.
Okay.
They fund it. I know other lakes that are part of the lake stewardship program. I don't think they test like every week though. Yeah, most lakes don't test every week unless it's like a swim beach that they can really afford it, like Green Lake or something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, the water quality parameters that are tested are usually dissolved oxygen and water clarity and temperature and water level that a monitor does like every week or every day or something like that. And then they also check for noxious weeds.
And in your opinion, do you think it's like important that we have something like that done?
I think it's good, yeah,
Yeah.
because through that program, they take these parameters and then the scientists at King County that run that program, they do a report every year about the ecological health of the lake in terms of water quality parameters. So it's pretty good. I mean, pretty great. This costs maybe a few $1,000s a year or something like that for the city to fund the volunteer. But yeah, you can ask me more info, email me, and then I'll put you in touch with the people that run the program, and they can help you be a good lobbyist.
Thank you.
But yeah,
All right, anybody else?
So, I assume that Howler Lake in many ways is kind of a typical urban lake with a lot of sewer pipe inflows with
Well,
sulfur, phosphorus, and things like that.
I don't think there's septics on
No.
Hollow.
There's no septic tanks here now, nothing.
Sewer runs around the lake,
Yes,
not too far from the buildings they were. The sewer line went in about 1956.
Yeah,
Was
And that really affects the water quality.
Right,
yeah,
but, there's one inflow on 128. From the street that comes in off 130th Meridian, and then it goes kind of it runs.
that's recently been recovered.
They cover it recently, the last couple of years, but when it's really raining, you walk by there, you can really hear it.
Yes,
And that's the place where the most heavy lead is anyway, on that side of that comes in, it just about.
okay.
Throwing it in the shed, because it's runoff from the street.
Has there been anybody thought about doing something to get the lead out?
Not that I
Mhm.
mean, it's just run off in the street, is the problem.
Yeah.
But I don't think any storm sewer necessarily comes in, I think it's mostly just that runoff.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't think the storm sewers.
So I just, I had to ask because that is a problem with a lot of urban lakes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, well, you can ask me one-on-one questions.
Yes.
Ask me.
Thank you very much. Okay. But one really short story, when they built the Nelson Apartments over on 143rd and Union, the contractor made an error and hooked the sewer into the storm sewer instead of the sanitary sewer, and it ran into Bitter Lake for 7 years. Yeah. That is most horrible. People kept saying, look, it's solid, they're solid.
Bitter, sound like bitter. Anybody?
No, it's not.
Yeah, do you want to keep these here?
When I was growing up in the 1970s,